In the heart of the city, where shadows stretch long and whispers carry weight, two rival gangs, the Vipers and the Scorpions, held the streets in a chokehold. For years, their feud had painted the sidewalks with sorrow, a relentless cycle of revenge that left families shattered and futures broken. The air was thick with tension, a constant, low hum of impending violence. One evening, under the pale glow of a flickering street lamp, the leaders, Marco of the Vipers and Julian of the Scorpions, met. They were young, their faces hardened by a life they hadn't chosen but were forced to lead. They spoke of a truce, a chance to end the bloodshed. They shook hands, a promise made in the dim light, a vow to lay down their weapons and let peace reclaim the neighborhood. For a few days, a fragile quiet settled over the city. Kids played in parks that had been deserted. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors with a little less fear, and mothers prayed this peace would last. It was a glimpse of a different world, a world where sons came home safe. But in the underbelly of this newfound .com, a darker plot was brewing. Julian and his second-in-command, a man named Silas, whose heart was a stone, had no intention of honoring the truce. For them, peace was just a tactic, a way to lower the Vipers' guard. Their promise was a lie, a carefully crafted setup for one final, devastating blow. They planned to ambush Marco and his crew at the old warehouse district, the very place where the truce was supposed to be celebrated. Marco, however, was no fool. He had grown up on these streets, and he knew that trust was a currency rarely traded honestly. He sensed something was off. The silence was too perfect, too staged. He saw the way some of the Scorpions looked at his crew, a flicker of something other than peace in their eyes. His gut, honed by years of survival, screamed at him. He told his crew to be ready, to hope for peace but prepare for war. The night of the supposed celebration arrived. The air was cold, carrying the scent of rain and rust. Marco led his Vipers to the warehouse district, his hand, never far from the weapon, tucked into his waistband. The place was an industrial graveyard, all crumbling brick and shattered windows. As they stepped into the main loading bay, the trap was sprung. Suddenly, the exits were blocked. The Scorpions emerged from the shadows, their faces grim, their hands holding more than just olive branches. The friendly atmosphere vanished, replaced by the chilling certainty of betrayal. Julian stood at the center, a smug, cold look on his face. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Marco, he sneered. "Did you really think we'd just forget?" Marco's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fury and disappointment. He had dared to hope. He had dared to believe in a promise. Now, that hope lay shattered at his feet. His men tensed, their hands gripping their own weapons, ready to fight, ready to die. The two groups faced each other, a mirror image of anger and fear. The space between them crackled with electricity, the prelude to a storm of violence that would spare no one. In that moment, a car screeched to a halt just outside the warehouse. A young woman, Elena, Marco's younger sister, jumped out. She had followed him, terrified of what this night might bring. She ran towards the entrance, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Marco, stop." Elena wasn't a fighter. She was a volunteer at a local community center, a place of sanctuary from the chaos of the streets. She held a small, worn Bible in her hand, the one their grandmother had given them. Her voice trembled, but it carried a strength that made everyone pause. She looked at Marco, then at Julien, her eyes pleading. "I was reading this tonight," she said, her voice echoing in the vast, empty space. "And I found something. It says, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Peacemakers, children of God. For a moment, no one moved. The words seemed out of place in this den of hatred, a drop of pure water in a pool of poison. Julian laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Peacemakers. Look around you, little girl. There are no peacemakers here. But Marco wasn't laughing. He was looking at his sister, at the tears in her eyes, at the hope she refused to let go of. He thought of all the years of fighting, of the friends he had lost, of the constant fear. He saw his own men, young men with their whole lives ahead of them, ready to throw it all away for a feud that had started before they were even born. He thought about the promise. Julian had broken it, yes. But what if he, Marchetto, chose to honor a different kind of promise? A promise to his sister, to his community, to himself. A promise to be better. Blessed are the peacemakers, Elena repeated, her voice softer now, but firm. Slowly, deliberately, Marco lowered his hand from his weapon. He took a step forward, his hands empty, open. She's right, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Enough of this. His own men stared at him, confused. The scorpions watched, wary, suspicious. Julian, Marco said, his gaze locked on his rival. You wanted a war? You set yours up? You broke your word? You win. Take the streets. They're yours. But we're not fighting tonight. We're not dying for this anymore. Silas, Julian's second, urged him on. Don't listen to him. It's a trick. Finish them now. But Julian was hesitating. He looked at Marco, standing there, defenseless. He looked at Elena, a beacon of fragile courage. He saw the faces of his own men, young, scared, and tired. The line from the Bible echoed in his mind, not because he was religious, but because it presented a choice he had never truly considered. Forgiveness, peace. It was a choice that required more strength than pulling a trigger. In that long, silent moment, something shifted. The thirst for vengeance began to feel like a poison, not a power. The cycle had to be broken by someone. Marco had made his choice. Now it was Julian's turn. With a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of conflict, Julian slowly lowered his weapon. He gave a slight nod to his men. One by one, the scorpions followed his lead. The tension that had been about to explode dissipated, leaving behind a strange, hollow emptiness that was slowly filled with relief. No one cheered. No one shook hands. The betrayal was still raw, but there was no fight. Marco turned and walked towards his sister, putting an arm around her. Together, they led the vipers out of the warehouse, leaving the scorpions standing in the shadows. That night, no lives were lost. No mothers cried for their sons. A promise was broken, but a more profound one was kept. Marco chose to be a peacemaker, not because it was easy, but because it was right. He chose to listen to a whisper of hope in a world that screamed for violence. The war between the vipers and the scorpions didn't end overnight. The wounds were too deep, but a seed had been planted. The story of that night in the warehouse spread through the neighborhood. It was a story of a leader who chose peace when he could have chosen war, who saved lives by laying down his pride. Marco learned that true strength wasn't in winning a fight, but in having the courage to stop one. And in that choice, in that moment of grace, he found a new path, not just for himself, but for everyone who was tired of the darkness. He became a peacemaker, and in doing so, he started to heal his broken city, one act of courage at a time.